Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, first of all, to sit this morning and listen, but also for giving me an opportunity to talk to you today. I want to congratulate the people who put this thing together. I know that coordinating things across the country has got to be a real problem. So my hat is off to you for having done so well and getting people from everywhere here. I think it's also important that you chose this date and this place to have your convention. Now, I'm not going to draw any conclusion about your politics, but when we think about a national political convention, we usually think about the people who are running for president and vice president. But sometimes we forget that these people are standard bearers for what the party stands for and its bedrock political philosophy, as well as the party platform, which is a roadmap for what may follow on. I'm very excited about the coming convention and election because Democrats need to strengthen our fragile majority in the House and Senate and retake the White House to get America back on track. Over the last 8 years, of this administration, I've seen an awful lot that's put America on the wrong path. From economic insecurity to uncertain civil liberties, using fear to get Americans to acquiesce to policies that really threaten the freedoms we are all experiencing and are trying to protect. As a member of Congress, I was in my office on 9/11 when the buildings were hit in New York and when the Pentagon was hit. So on a real internal level, I understand fear and understand what this country went through and the danger that we face from extremists around the world and the need to defend our nation and our people. But I also understand that fear can be a weapon, as effective a weapon as any other, and I believe this administration has used that weapon to weaken American core values. In the process, it has made us afraid of people who are not American, and it has made us forget that all Americans are descended from immigrants. I believe it's time to stop being afraid and start remembering American history and our values and our national strength. On July 4th, 1776, when the 13 colonies were about to become one nation, the combined population was 2.5 million people. Roughly 80% of them looked like me, and the rest were largely African-American slaves. That was the America on its first day, a very narrowly defined ethnic population that sought religious freedom and justice for all, meaning themselves. Now, obviously, over time, immigrants came to America from every part of the world in search of a better life and in search of freedom and justice. Now, just imagine if we had defined back then what it meant to be an American based on the religious and ethnic makeup of the population on that first day. Does anyone think that this grand experiment would have lasted till today? I certainly don't. And I believe that America's future depends on remembering who we are. We are all immigrants, practically speaking. There's a few people, you'll see some of them here in Colorado, who actually were here when we arrived, but basically we are all immigrants in this country. My ancestors, the story of the Irish coming to the United States is not a pretty one. When we arrived here, we were sick, starving, ill-educated. We spoke the wrong language. We worshiped in the wrong church. We were everything that some immigrants or groups have been since then. And I'm certainly no Pollyanna. I don't think that coming to America was easy for anyone, because it wasn't. And over the course of history, America has needed leaders like Martin Luther King to remind us that we must be vigilant in our commitment to freedom and justice for all Americans. There have been times in our history, and this is certainly one of them, when we have forgotten that America's greatest strength comes from America's ethnic diversity. And there have been times in American history, and there is another one, when we have let fear subvert our better judgment. Now, if I were to ask for a show of hands today, I know that many of you would say you've been afraid for your personal safety in recent years and afraid that you were being judged on the color of your skin or your name or what religious institution you were a part of, and not by the content of your character, which is what Martin Luther King feared and fought for. And the civil rights movement he led changed America forever for the better. But what has not changed is the need to remember the profound words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said during America's darkest hour, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Now, following 9/11, we had an incident in Seattle. People didn't know who caused all this in New York, so they thought, well, it must be somebody who, looks different or is from another religion or something. They went out and beat a Sikh motel owner almost to death. He wasn't Muslim. He wasn't an Arab. But Americans they had no idea. And so what we did here in Seattle, or did there in Seattle, was to form the hate-free zone. We declared Seattle a hate-free zone. Now that organization has changed its name to We Are One America, which is sort of a more positive way to look at it, because of the attacks against people who were different, whether they had brown skin. We had problems with the Somalis, and we had problems with Muslim women who didn't want to let their kids go to school, and we didn't want to go to the grocery store because they wore their natural garb. And so there was all kinds of things going on in Seattle, and Seattle was proactive in fighting that. I led the charge with some of the people in the city council and the county council because I didn't want to live in a place where people were afraid to live freely as all the rest of us did. And many communities in this country didn't do that. For as long as America has been a nation, there have always been threats of one kind or another, but we usually had leaders who understood that meeting those threats did not require us losing our moral standing and our leadership in the world. Now, in my opinion, this administration has done exactly that. Until this president, America has never invaded another country that posed no security threat. And until this president, America was not a country that attacked another country for its riches. Ultimately, that kind of activity becomes a boomerang and eviscerates our moral standing. And that's exactly what's happened to the president as a result of the invasion of Iraq. Let me be really blunt. Where is the moral high ground for us to stand on and say to the Russians, you can't go into Georgia, you can't invade Ossetia or Abkhazia? For the sake of oil, we have forsaken our moral standing in the world. Compare that now to John Kennedy and what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We stood the tallest we've ever